I didn't make it.
Yeah.
Until 2004.
I see. Oh my goodness.
Of course, the '68 case is kind of a cute one.
Yeah.
From the Navy point of view, because in '68 and '69, a bunch of us had our eyes on hunting, and we were deploying with regularity.
Right.
And I had a custom rifle built up, and three of us all sighted it in, so we knew how it would shoot. Each guy had his own boxes of ammunition, and the rifle followed us wherever we went. And invariably, every time a slot came up that you could go hunting, we all wound up going to someplace else instead. Timbuk nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. Just a little history. 10 years ago on the radio, I started a daily feature called Bravo Brazos Valley, and I would, about once a week, I would use that as a vehicle to talk about a veteran in town, talk about their military service. And about 4 years ago, John Bennett over at KAMU called me and said, Tom, why don't we take what you do on the radio with the veterans and put it on television, a 30-minute show. And I said, sounds great. And that became a reality about 3.5 years ago or so. And in the last 3.5 years, it's a weekly show. It's on KAMU. And over the last 3.5 years, I've interviewed about 125, 130 veterans on TV. And many, all local veterans, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Desert Storm, some that have just come back from Iraq, mostly World War II and Vietnam. And what we do is we go to the KMU studio on Thursday and we sit down just like you and I are sitting right now, just at a table, and we just sort of visit about military service and sort of what you did. So tell me, where'd you grow up first off?
Bay City in Houston.
In Bay City? Yeah. Okay. And you went to
Lamar.
Lamar High School.
Came up here for 1 year, and now I still laugh about it. A&M cost too much to go to school back then. It cost all of $500 for a whole year.
Right.
And I decided that I wanted to save my money. I'd saved up for a car when I graduated, and I applied to the Naval Academy.
I see.
Lyndon Johnson pulled me in. And I went from here to Annapolis. And on the road from there.
I see. So you were at the Naval Academy for
4 years.
For 4 years, and completed that. And when did you get into your pilot training? Or into your air training?
Basically, by the end of the summer graduation. You spend the first summer after graduation. From there is a marked time period when they're trying to get everybody into the different schools, and there's just not. Then there wasn't enough room to get everybody in the schools. I suspect it's still the same today.
Right.
And so I didn't get to school until September. I spent the summer at Annapolis, basically teaching students how to shoot rifles, and
this summer of '65 after you graduated.
Right, that, and then being a spare hand crewing on the sailboats that they had there until end of the summer, and then went to Pensacola and got on with business.
Right. What'd you fly? What'd you want to fly? What'd you end up flying?
I wanted to fly the A-1 Skyraider. That was a very popular airplane for everybody to fly back then. Well, the last of the propeller fighters.
Right.
And as a result, I went into the propeller training program. And toward the end of it, the official word came out that they were in the process of shutting down the Skyraider pipeline, and that we would have to try to fly something else. And out of my section, only one guy got into the Skyraiders, and he got so far as the training air group, and they shut it down. He wound up flying S2 twin-engine airplanes off carriers.
Mm-hmm.
But I was lucky. I got my next best choice, which was the P-3 patrol plane,
Mm-hmm.
the 4-engine turboprop.
P3. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And it was worth it. I mean, the P-3 turns out to be a a fighter plane in disguise,
Yeah.
because Lockheed built the airplane so doggone heavy and tough. And one of our projects at Annapolis was aircraft design, and they gave us a blind design. So theoretically, you did not know what airplane you were designing. And the basic numbers came out to meet the Navy spec. You had a 3-engine airplane with 3,300 horsepower engines. Well, then some of us figured out that we were designing the P-3,
Mm-hmm.
and we went and grabbed the data on the P-3, and of course the P-3 has 4,600
Right.
engines. And when you get in one of those airplanes, it's not your typical airliner.
Yeah.
It's smaller than a Lockheed Electra, which is the basic airplane. It's a little bit smaller and has somewhat hotter engines.
Mm-hmm.
And the airplane can do things in it that you just don't think a 4-engine airplane can do.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And they've lasted a long time because they built them first in '62, and
Mm-hmm.
they're just now phasing them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was what I wanted to fly, and I got into those, and went through the replacement training squadron in Patuxent River, Maryland, and graduated out of that in I guess it was July of '67,
Mm-hmm.
and drove down to Jacksonville, Florida, where my fleet squadron was supposed to be. I was very pleased because I was going to East Coast Squadron, which meant I was not going to Vietnam, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to the base, the squadron wasn't there, so I assumed deployment. Went and checked in at the wing headquarters, and the guy just handed me a folder with airline tickets and said, "Go get your shots. We've been waiting for you."
Uh-huh.
And I opened it up, and there it was, Travis Field, California. Then
Mm-hmm.
across the pond. So basically, 48 hours after I checked into Jacksonville, I was flying off Vietnam.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So you thought that you might be deployed to Europe somewhere or
Right.
something like that, but
Right, because that was
yeah.
what the typical
Right.
student idea was of Vietnam. I mean,
Yeah.
even though we'd already seen quite a lot
Right.
of Vietnam while we were flight students, because we had a lot of Marine Corps instructors, and every one of them had come home with at least war stories, if not video.
Right.
And some of the video was quite scary, so it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
And anyway, we still had the misconception that East Coast meant let's go chase Russians, West Coast meant Vietnam, and
Sure.
it didn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were off to California, so you knew where you were headed.
Yep.
So when did you arrive in country?
Well, I didn't actually go into country. I went to the Philippines
Philippines, okay.
because the P-3s were mostly based out of the Philippines. We commuted to the war every night.
I got you.
So basically, at sunset, you were rolling down the runway and going over to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
We went in country when the weather was bad.
Right.
When we had a hurricane, typhoon sitting
Right.
in between the Philippines and the coast.
When it would have prevented you from
Then we would fly over
flying your mission
to
from the
Cam Ranh
Philippines.
Bay or Da Nang
Yeah.
and fly out of there.
Right. Right.
And, actually, in my squadron, during our time over there, we spent as much time off the Chinese coast as we did off Vietnam. You were much more scared off the coast of China than you were ever down around Vietnam.
Why is that?
Well, we're up there generally plotting the fire control lock-on from the Chinese radars,
Mhm.
and you had continual lock-on. Up around Hainan Island, you could have lock-ons coming at you from every direction.
Yeah.
So I was a navigator then. It would just plot where they were,
Yeah.
plot the locations of the systems.
Right.
Because when you were down off Vietnam, if you were so unlucky as to get fired on, the bad guys knew that we could have fighter bombers on top of them instantaneously.
Mhm.
So they left us alone.
Yeah.
And we would go in at night sometimes and drop flares for the people on the beach or inland. So you put a string of flares in the air and then back off and watch the fighter bombers work under the lights, which was definitely an unusual situation to see.
I imagine.
Because those things were like 10 million candle power, some terrific amount of light. Those flares popped out.
Right.
You drop a string of 4 or 6 of them, then the fighters are working under it. It really looked weird. It looked strange.
Yeah. Yeah. But that was your job, was to like drop flares to.
Well, we carried a load of bombs.
All right.
We were the stopper in case the our Vietnamese sent down their torpedo boats again. We only made one run on a high-speed target, actually 2 of them, and that turned out to be in one of our boats coming home from clandestine ops. But turned out later I knew the guy in the boat, and I was the bombardier at the moment, and I laid our searchlight beam on it, and the way that the system was put together, if you put the searchlight beam on your target at night, you're at the right altitude, and then punch the pickle switch, you were going to hit the target. There was no doubt about that. It was pretty impressive when he did it for practice, because the bombs we used were not normal bombs. We used depth charges rigged for surface burst, which is a 100% different weapon from the typical bomb you see in the movies. And you would put a string of 8 of those in the water, and they would blow a series of geysers about 200 feet in the air. And whenever we dropped them in practice, you'd be off watching somebody else drop them, and your target was a little styrofoam boat, about a 20-foot outboard motor job, and you'd see that thing up on top of the geysers. So yeah, we got him.
Yeah,
with no doubt about it.
Yeah, you sent him up there. Yeah. So you were trained as a navigator?
No.
As a bombardier?
No, I was trained as a pilot.
You were trained as a pilot.
In the patrol airplanes at that time, the first position that a pilot took was the navigator.
Was a navigator. Okay.
And because you had to learn all the positions in the airplane.
Exactly.
So a typical person toward the end of your tour of duty, if you were a pilot, you would be a plane commander, but you would also be checked out as a minimum as a navigator and probably 2 other positions in the airplane.
I see. But eventually you were a pilot.
Yep.
I mean, you were a pilot.
Well, I was a plane commander by the end of my first tour.
Yeah. Okay. How many missions did you go? Do you know about? Were you there a year, or how long were you there? Were you
in Vietnam?
Yeah, or in the Philippines?
6 months.
6 months. Okay.
We came home just as Tet was starting, and it was kind of a shock to come home and hear Walter Cronkite telling us how badly we're losing, because we'd just been over there and we've been seeing firsthand the bad guys getting ripped up pretty badly.
Yeah. So
it was kind of made you look askance at the television. What's that man talking about?
Right.
Because of course, history's proved that was not the case.
Exactly.
But at that time, all the hype said that we're losing, and if you, like I said, we just come back from there. No, we're not losing. What's going on?
Yeah.
It was really strange.
Sure. Yeah.
But that was a hallmark very much of my entire time in the service, is that, and particularly the P3 business, because we couldn't, I don't know what I can say today even. We didn't talk about what we did because a lot of what we did was highly classified.
Exactly.
Good example. There's a book out right now that's been quite popular about submarines in the same time that I was in the Navy. And I forget what the title of it is. Blind Man's Bluff, I believe. And it goes on and on, talking about all these submarine missions. And a number of them we were on too. We were right there on top of them. But is there any mention whatsoever of the airplanes coaching the submarine in? Because that was much of our work.
Yeah.
Was to gain contact on somebody and then pass the word to a submarine, let the submarine come in and stay with them.
Yeah.
And that went on, as far as I know, from 1964 until today.
Right, exactly. Well, to the extent that you can talk about it or say about it in the missions that you had in the 6 months, were there? I assume that there were some that were a little bit dicier than others, as far as.
Oh, I wouldn't say dicey. Well, we followed the rules in my squadron, and as such, we had a few people who wanted to get their hero medals. I can remember one plane commander in particular who would have done anything to have gotten one of the hero medals. And I was assigned to his crew one time as a backup navigator. His navigator was sick, and the commanding officer got hold of me on the way out to the airplane, and he said, "Larry, whatever you do, don't get him near anything that shoots." And this guy, as soon as he got in the airplane, you learn very quickly, all he wanted was glory. And there's no glory in getting blown out of the sky in a 4-engine bomber with 12, 13 people on board. And I can remember piloting that guy. He was just, take me in close to the shore. And I found a nice little half-moon bay, and it was loaded with targets, but right in the middle, and what he couldn't see in the cockpit, was a ship that was squawking IFF. So we knew it was a good guy. So we just motored this guy up in there and let him go look at the bay, and he was flying rather low. It would have been easy to take a pot shot at us. And then he found that Coast Guard cutter sitting up there inside it. Oh, he was upset.
Yeah.
We just went whistling around the coasties waved, we waved. And everybody went off. And that was pretty common. The only dicey stuff was when you went up into the area off the coast of North Vietnam, and you got into the operations up there. When the aircraft carriers were gone, the P-3s substituted for the carriers and maintained a lot of the secure patrols up there for the surface ships. And if we saw anything coming out, we just that might be a torpedo boat, we just pass it on to the Air Force or whoever else was available for close air support and send them in. They would take care of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the only time we ever made a run or anything up there turned out to be a cluster of Chinese communist fishing boats a little bit too far south. But even locating them was hard because it was in the rain and all kinds of lousy weather. Nobody in their right mind would be out in, except the fishermen.
Right.
We came shooting over them. It was, fishing boats, goodbye.
Yeah.
I mean, that was something that you saw quite often. It didn't matter what ocean you were in. You'd find somebody in the most god-awful location. 9 times out of 10, it was a fishing boat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my hat's off to a lot of those deep water fishermen. They have nerve.
I would imagine. Yeah.
But in Vietnam, really, for us, it wasn't bad. The squadron that relieved us had the worst losses of any Navy squadron in the entire patrol squadron. In any place in the Vietnam War. They lost 2 aircraft, all the crews, and in both cases, the air crews involved totally violated the rules. And on the one hand, I knew all the guys on one crew. On one hand, you felt real bad for them.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to get shot down.
Sure.
But on the other hand, they violated the rules. And we'd already seen it. If you violate the rules, you're going to get shot at.
Yeah.
And when you're a big target, and there's no point in taking a big target in there with the guys with a bunch of anti-aircraft.
Right.
And one air crew got shot down. The guys I knew the best got shot down because they violated the rule of making repeated passes on a warship that was unknown to you. If you ran in on a warship that you didn't know what it was, you made one pass, took your pictures, and you got out of there. Because none of the modern ships until about 1990 had an ability to lock on to an airplane in close to them and moving fast. And we knew that. So you could dive in on the boat, whatever it was, make one pass, get out of there. And these guys didn't recognize what the boat was, came back around. It was a Cambodian torpedo boat, and he shot them down. And our relations were never good with Cambodians anyway.
Sure.
But he shot them to pieces. They made it back to the beach, but the airplane was on fire, and he just broke up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that got people in trouble. Sure. Really, just about everybody I know who ever got into trouble because they violated the rules.
The rules that were put there for their safety.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I got shot at that same tour of duty by the Brits, by a British destroyer, and that was in the Mediterranean. So, what is there to say what's right and what's wrong, and what's going to happen?
Right. So your 6-month tour of Vietnam is over, and you come home?
Oh no.
Where you go?
Well, we came home to Jacksonville, Florida.
Right.
And in the rotation that the squadrons had then, it was a 15-month cycle. You basically start off was 1 month was set aside as available for leave, rest and relaxation for everybody. Then you went into 6 months. That was theoretically, and I put a big letter to theoretical for training. And then the next 9-month period you were available for deployment. And deployments varied anywhere from 5 months to 9 months.
So where all did you go?
Any place with 8,000-foot runway. After Vietnam, I stayed on the East Coast. Went to Argentia, Newfoundland. That base is closed now. Thule, Greenland, Sonderstrom, Greenland, Iceland, the Azores, Bermuda, Puerto Rico, Panama.
These are strips where you would fly to.
Yes, and be based there.
And be based there.
Rota, Spain, Sigonella, Sicily, Suda Bay, Crete, and spent a little time in the south of France.
Yeah.
And we just went all over, and then we went to a lot of other places. I can't even think of all of them because we flew all over Spain. Nearest I ever got to North Africa was sliding across the coast one time when I shouldn't have. And didn't get way into the South Atlantic till my next tour of duty. But we were just all over.
These were mainly security operations, or
sub chasing and surface surveillance. Basically, we're either chasing the bad guys' submarines, or we were chasing the bad guys' surface ships. And surface ships was everything from the infamous electronic warfare trawler that the Russians had so many of, on up to their major warships.
Yeah.
And that was always interesting. The trawlers were our biggest operation because the trawler had a lot of jobs. He was there to shadow our warships, so the bad guys knew what they were doing. Makes sense. They were also involved in their own variations of anti-submarine warfare, and they were involved in gathering intelligence on everybody in the free world. So it was always an important factor to know where the trawlers were. And the Russians had some beautiful ships, and most of their trawlers, not all of them, but most of them were converted fishing boats, whalers actually. And as a result, the naval units that were trawlers turned out to be pretty easy to locate because you'd see the boat, you'd recognize the class from a long distance off. So that every one of them out there, you had to go in and look and see which one was a real fisherman and which one was a naval unit, because the naval ones are all nice and clean. And if they do have fishing gear on it, you look at it, you see that fishing gear has been wrapped up and stacked up there ever since the ship left port. It hadn't moved. And then the ones of the real fishermen were just like anybody else's fisher. Look at the fishing boats down at Port Aransas. You know what a fishing boat looks like.
Right, exactly.
But the Russian ones were all over. The
Yeah.
what do you call them? The whalers were interesting because some of them you did see the big cannon up on the bow for shooting
Yeah.
the whales.
Yeah.
Of course, we found one of those. He's a real fisherman because the operational ones didn't have the gun.
Yeah, right.
They generally had little canvas covered something up there, which was electronic antennas.
Right.
And you could also pick out the antenna arrays on most of them.
Yeah.
Of course, the cute thing about the Russians, I haven't seen any pictures to back it up today, but a Soviet merchant ship of the era was almost always an electronic intelligence gathering vessel as well. You could pick out their antennas on them as you flew by, and oh, that's a brand new one. You see, you look over there, he's brand new. He's fresh out of the doggone port. He's got all these fancy new antennas, so you had to go back and take pictures of it for the electronic warfare people to analyze what kind of antennas they're carrying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a lot of our work right there.
Right.
And keeping track of all their different warships.
Right. What years are we talking about now? What year span?
Oh, that's a 67 to 70.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that was very active. Like, there's been a lot of business lately about where were you when the first man landed on the moon?
40 years ago?
Yep,
69?
yep. Well, I pulled out my logbook to look at where were we. And we were out chasing submarines off Bermuda. But at the month of July was a wild month because in that month we were literally everywhere, from Thule, Greenland, to Puerto Rico and Guantanamo,
Yeah.
and that's just one squadron.
Right.
And of course that was a cool time because what else was going down? That was the first Soviet nuclear attack submarine to come over to our side of the water. And one of our crews picked him up when he broached, came to the surface in a rainstorm, and it just happened the airplane was down there with him because he'd seen something funny in the water and dropped down. And sure enough, there he was, and it turned into a mad scramble to chase that guy. And our squadron stayed on top of him all the way from Newfoundland to Cuba when he went into port.
Wow.
And that was fun.
Yeah.
Because those guys, they weren't very good at that time. And you could fly over and you could see the submarine underwater.
Right.
Just see him down in the water.
Yeah.
That was cool.
They weren't hiding good. So this was in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
And then what after that?
I taught ROTC
Where?
at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, upstate New York.
Uh-huh.
That was an interesting tour duty. I got a master's degree on the side,
Yeah.
going to school there as well. And in the summertime, I came down here to Texas to fly T-34s down at Corpus Christi to take the ROTC midshipman flying. Basically, that was to see who would get airsick and who wouldn't.
Down at the Naval Air Base?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
And what were you flying? Trainers?
Yeah, trainers. Little T-34 single, engine
Right.
propeller airplane. And some days it was so hot down there, just like it's been here,
Yeah.
that you climbed into the airplane and you just put that little nose upward and you climbed until it got cool.
Yeah.
Because that was the only way you get cool.
Right. 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 So you did that during the summers?
Yep. And then
Yeah.
back to New York. I had my own T-34 up there, which was kind of nice, for 2 years. So I did student flying.
And where were you teaching again? ROTC?
Rensselaer Polytechnic. That's in Troy, New York. That's across the river from Albany, New
That's a
York.
college?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. In
It's
their
a-
ROTC program?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's another school like A&M. It's more on engineering, very little ag, engineering, architecture. It was then the biggest source of nuclear power people in the country.
I see.
It was very big in nukes.
Yeah.
we turned. In fact, that was the whole reason for that ROTC unit to exist, was to get the students trained in nuclear physics so they could go in and drive submarines or aircraft carriers.
So these were pretty sharp students.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
I thought I was pretty good when I came out of high school.
Uh-huh.
I taught spherical trigonometry and navigation, and I would have classes where the average student, back when they had 3 SAT scores to look at, an average kid would have scores of 760, 780 on
Out
each
of
one.
800, yeah.
And sometimes you have a bunch of kids who are 800s.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one young man, I'll never forget him, who I catch him in a test, and he's using a calculator. Well, at that time, calculators, 1971, that was cutting edge to have any of those pocket calculators. And I'm watching, I said, how's he doing that? Because navigation is done in radian measure, and the calculators back then only worked in normal 10 decimal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching, I started to jump on him, and said, I want to see what he does. My automatic reaction was, I want to see how he screws up. Now, he had all the right answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally asked him, how'd you do it? He said, oh, I worked out the conversion units. So he would do everything in decimal, and then he'd hit the conversions.
Uh-huh.
And I figured any kid who had studied that hard and had done that much in his math, he earned it. And 3 years later, you could get a pocket-held calculator that would do all that automatically for you.
Right, right. He may have invented that calculator.
He may have.
Yeah.
I mean, but those kids were so smart. Oh, it was scary smart.
Yeah.
And we had the typical, for a Ivy League type school, for that era, we had the typical anti-war crowd.
Sure.
Well, the trouble is the anti-war crowd was so inept that our own students took them on and would just, I'll be polite and say, defeat their every maneuver.
Uh-huh.
And it was absolutely humorous.
Yeah.
I mean, the liberals tried to build a big old ram out of plywood they would use to break up marching formations one time. Well, they chose the building to do it in was up in the attic of the same building the ROTC was in. Dumb. And as a result, we found out that our boys and girls had gone up and just taken it apart and taken all the plywood down to the furnace and burned it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people were very upset with us. So, that's just students having good fun.
So how long did you teach there?
3 years.
3 years.
And
so what year are we now when you finished there?
I finished in 73.
Okay, and then what?
And I went to Lexington. I went to the Lexington because of a accident the ship was in April of 73. She was up in Boston Harbor for a yard period. Coming out, the captain broke the rules. I sort of said about following rules.
Mm-hmm.
He broke the rules and ran the ship aground in a fog.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't take 50,000-ton ships out in a fog unless there's a national emergency.
Right.
Of course, it wasn't. And it cost the Navy a lot of money. One new propeller, a bunch of other stuff. And they relieved the navigator and the assistant navigator and about 3 or 4 other officers. In the Navy, when you run a ship aground, it's not nice.
No.
And the relief for the navigator, and I was the relief assistant navigator, and the guy who would be my boss, the navigator, came out of a squadron in Pensacola. And the one thing between all of us was that we were all navigation instructors.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of like, hint, hint,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to fix that ship.
Yeah.
And that was a nice tour of duty because, well, my first reaction was...
And where were you all docked? Where was this?
Pensacola.
Yeah, Pensacola.
She was based in Pensacola, and the ship ran routinely between Pensacola and Corpus Christi.
Mm-hmm.
And she was quite a good ship. The Lexington was an amazing ship because She was mothballed only once, and that was right at the end of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And she came out as a result of the Korean War and stayed online ever since, until she was finally put down for good. I believe it was 1990.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason that the Lex had to be put down, finally given to Corpus Christi,
Mm-hmm.
was not that there was anything wrong with the ship. There weren't any more spare parts.
Mm-hmm.
Because the interesting thing is that the power plant, the engines of a Essex-class aircraft carrier are identical to all the battleships
Mm-hmm.
built during World War II.
Yeah.
So if you had a battleship nearby you, you had all the spare parts you needed.
Right.
We fed off the USS Alabama, and whenever anything went wrong in our engine room,
Yeah.
it would send the guys over to Mobile, and the result was that there's only one engine room on the Alabama that's open for tourists,
Mm-hmm.
because the rest of them have all been picked clean by the Lexington.
How long were you on the Lex?
2.5 years,
Really?
and she was fun.
Going from Pensacola to
Yep.
Corpus.
We basically
We got it fixed first, right?
Pardon?
We got it fixed first. I mean, because
Oh, yeah.
of where it was running around.
Yep.
And then it was going back and forth.
Yep, went back and forth. Went down to Guantanamo, did a tour down there. Well, not tour, just a work-up cruise down there.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating, because Lex got to show off, just like she did in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
They put us into a battle, if you will, between us and the Saratoga,
Yeah.
which is a big fleet carrier.
Right.
And we kept pounding the doggone Saratoga over and over again.
Yeah.
And basically people on the Sarah didn't expect a good flight deck crew.
Yeah.
And the Lex probably had about the best flight deck crew in the Navy, primarily because they had more experience than anybody else.
Right.
Because if you have a carrier that operates basically 24 hours a day, the crew is going to have more experience. They have to. And we were very lucky to have essentially no accidents while I was on board.
Yeah. Now, were you still flying now? I mean, are you,
Yeah, oh yeah.
you were flying off the deck
Off
of
the
the
Lex.
Lex. And what were you flying?
Airplane called the C-1A.
Okay.
It's a twin engine, reciprocating engine aircraft. It's a variation of a anti-submarine airplane,
Yeah.
but it's configured for transport,
Right.
cargo.
Right.
And it was a good little airplane.
Where'd you fly to?
East Coast to West Coast,
Yeah.
mostly between Texas and Norfolk,
Yeah.
or Texas and Jacksonville,
Uh-huh.
or any place we had to get spare parts.
I see.
And then when you're on the ship, you were basically flying from the ship to somewhere along the coast to pick up passengers
Right.
or parts and back out to the ship.
Right.
And like when you came down to Corpus Christi, one of the most important things was to pick up a load of frozen shrimp.
So what years? 2.5 years, you said?
Yep.
What years were that?
Basically 73 to 75.
Okay. So this was for where you were. This was largely peacetime. I mean, this was
Yeah.
Cold War was over.
No, Cold War wasn't over.
Cold War wasn't
We
over.
had in
but
fact, we had a near run-in with a pair of Russian cruisers down in the Gulf.
I see. So you're still searching. You're still looking for.
Still looking.
Still looking.
Oh, you're always
Yeah.
looking.
You're always looking. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
after that, I went to War College.
Right.
That was Naval War College. All the war colleges are great tour duty.
Where were you?
That was Newport, Rhode Island.
Okay. That's not a bad. That's not a bad.
That's not a
gig.
bad place to
It's
go.
not
anyway.
a bad place. That's where my wife and I went there on vacation about 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh, you know that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I gather from looking at the pictures and ads, it's only gotten better.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We went to all the mansions and.
Yep.
And we walked the cliff walk. And
Mhm.
did all that
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
you got to.
Oh yeah. Stayed in bed and breakfast. Had a great meal.
Yep.
Yeah. We were there for 9 days. We spent 6 days in Newport and 4 days in Boston.
Mhm.
And yeah, we had a great time.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Newport's not a bad.
Oh,
gig.
enjoy all those lobsters.
Yeah. Well, you were on the Lex. I mean, have you, having served there, do you ever have a desire? Have you ever gone down there to be a tourist?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and gone back on it
Yeah, well,
and
she-
watched all the little kids and everybody running around and
Kids are
jumping
having
around.
fun. Well, that's not a
I
big
mean, I've
difference.
probably done. See, we go to Port Aransas all the
Oh,
time,
good.
and we just spent 9 days down there, as a matter of fact. And I guess I've probably been on the Lex maybe a half a dozen times. Just paid my money, taking grandkids and all that.
Well, the
Just
Lex
had a
was doing
blast.
that when I was on board in
Yeah.
the 70s.
Yeah,
When you were tied up in Pensacola, they were regular
regular tours,
tourist times
guest
all the
tours.
time. So
Yeah.
she's been doing the tourist game for a long time, and
Well, I bet it's made Corpus Christi a lot of money.
oh, it has to.
I mean, that's one of the biggest tourist attractions in the
Sure.
state right now.
She is. She's big. She's pretty.
Yeah.
She's in good shape.
And they've done a great job with transferring it into a tourist attraction
Yep.
with its, the way it's all laid out with your decks and
Decks
you
and
can
airplanes, and you can
and
go
you
everywhere.
from section 1 to 2 and all of that and everything. And it's
She's a good old ship. She's going to stay there a
Yeah.
long time.
the last time I was there, I went with a couple of really military buffs, a couple of friends of mine from Huntsville, and they wanted to read everything. I mean, they read every plaque. They read everything. We were probably there for about 4 hours.
Gee, I wonder if they read my doggone book on how to drive how to run the engines.
I don't know. Is that on display there?
It was at one time.
Uh-huh.
I wrote this doggone book in 1974,
Yeah.
and it's
It's probably
still
behind.
there.
It's probably behind glass somewhere. Probably sitting there. Okay, so you went to War College.
Yep. And then from there, I went back to another patrol squadron
Mm-hmm.
up in Maine,
Yeah.
and that was interesting. Same old thing, 8,000-foot runway, and
Yeah.
you went there, and again, we were going pretty much the same locations again.
Yeah.
Sicily, Spain,
What are you flying now?
P3s, still P3s.
Still P3s.
Different model, but
Yeah.
not that much difference between
Mm-hmm.
the two models that I flew. And then we went to all over the Caribbean, South Atlantic now.
Mm-hmm.
The Ascension Island is a long way from nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, Ascension Island has 366 days of good weather a year,
Right.
and it has the longest ranged radio direction finder in the world is on it. And it has to, because the place is in the middle of nowhere. It's 8 degrees, I believe it is, south latitude.
Mm-hmm.
And your nearest alternate runway is in Liberia, which is like 3 hours flying time
Mm-hmm.
away from you. And the humor about it is that when you find out, well, the Ascension is a British piece of property, and the reason that the Brits are there was because of Napoleon, because they established the base on Ascension to protect the island of St. Helena,
Mm-hmm.
where they put Napoleon, which is 600 miles further south.
I'll be darned.
I mean, you're talking about the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
and those islands are nowheresville.
Uh-huh.
But there's bases on them. There's a base down there.
And you found them.
Oh yeah. It's a strange place to go.
So you were based out of Maine, though?
Yes, yes. Maine was a nice place to live also.
Yeah, yeah.
Maine is unusual. I mean, unfortunately, Uncle Sam, in the later place I worked, had me up in snow country, and Maine's the only place I've ever lived where the people are rigged and ready for snow. They pay attention to the weathermen. The weathermen are good, and when the forecast comes down that there's going to be snow, the minute you've got 2 inches of snow on the ground, here comes a snowplow.
Mm-hmm.
And they keep the streets clear.
Yeah.
I mean, nowhere else have I ever lived
Mm-hmm.
up in Yankee Land
Mm-hmm.
was it anywhere near that good.
Yeah.
So the Maine folks are real good.
So what years are we in Maine?
76 to 79.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then where?
Milton, Florida. That's a small town next to Pensacola.
Mm-hmm.
T-34C model now, training squadron,
Mm-hmm.
and flying those. And that was fun. That was just a fun tour duty.
Mm-hmm.
The T-34 Charlie, or C as it was called, was the first time my tour career to that point I'd ever flown a brand new airplane.
Yeah.
We'd always had old ones.
Was this essentially doing what you were doing in Corpus and training?
Well, there was a lot more involved.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just familiarization down in Corpus the first time. But when I was over there, I was a regular flight instructor. I taught instruments, basic instruments, radio instruments.
Now these
And then-
trainers are what? These are 2-seaters?
Yep.
You're in the
And then
back?
Acrobatics.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're in the back.
It depended on what you're training.
Mm-hmm.
Instrument training, the instructor's in the front.
Yeah.
Familiarization training and your basic primary and all your acrobatic instructors in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And because the back seat, you have the ability to put a hood
Yeah.
over that, so you want the hood over the
Yeah.
student
Yeah.
who's doing his instrument training.
So you really got to see who was getting sick then, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. That's a lot of sickness.
Yeah.
And got to see a lot of good students too.
Sure.
Because I was the I'll be polite and call myself the remedial acrobatic instructor.
Really?
Yeah. Well, when somebody couldn't do acrobatics, they gave them to me and said, "Okay, Larry, either make them fly or ground them."
Uh-huh.
And it was kind of interesting because sometimes you'd have a student who, for one reason or another, you saw in their acrobatic work, they just weren't cut out for flying.
Yeah.
They just didn't have the feel for the stick.
Right.
And of course, in that airplane, it had a very, very soft feel on the stick. You could fly the airplane 90% or more of the maneuvers with just 2 fingers and a thumb on the stick. That's all the pressure you needed.
Yeah.
But you'd find those students up there with a death grip. And of course, you can feel the death grip too, because the airplane's going jerk, 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 jerk. And it's interesting for me because while I was in the 34th Cs, we did not have a simulator for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my last tour of duty, I got tied up with the simulator business, and we had a brand new flight simulator for that airplane then. And the complaints that we heard from the students on my first tour of duty, and the complaints later about the students about the simulator were identical.
Mm-hmm.
Because the simulator enabled the students, once they got in the airplane, to fly it perfectly.
Right.
And so they were complaining about, well, the simulator's too touchy. Hey, I heard that.
Uh-huh.
I just heard that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
There has been a change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was
So
a
did
big
you ever have
difference.
any students like almost get you in trouble or anything, or did you?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. Every time you took a remedial student up and for an acrobatic flight,
Yeah.
the worst thing they would do to you would get you into what was a inverted flat spin. That's the airplane is upside down, and then
And-
it does that,
Yeah. Okay.
and it's pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, I would think so.
And the student,
there's some G's involved here.
well, not that they're negative though.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And the doggone student is still, he's got his stick back here. And you scream out in bloody murder. And then you finally break them off the stick with one method or another. And then getting out of the maneuvers, that was actually very simple.
Uh-huh.
And you didn't even want to tell the student how you did it.
Yeah.
Because on that airplane, if worst came to worst, all you had to do was go to full power.
Yeah.
Because it had so much power, it'd motor itself right out of a spin,
Of a
of
problem.
almost any spin.
Yeah.
But normally you just use normal spin recovery, although you're upside down and all that, and the airplane would just come to a halt. And then, depending on how high or low your nose was, you would ideally want to just roll upright and come out.
Yeah.
I did that a lot.
Pretty much separated the wheat from the shaft.
Yeah. Well, some people thought I was nuts too, but
I had a chance about 7 or 8 years ago to fly. There was a guy, there was a fella. Matter of fact, he was killed doing this.
Mm-hmm.
It was a company called Texas Air Aces.
mm-hmm. Okay, I know the outfit.
Yeah, they were out of not Spring, but somewhere near Houston.
Yep.
And they advertised on our radio station. And in exchange of advertising, they took me and the news director up on up in one of their trainers.
That was
And
T-34A.
Yeah. And I've got the video of it and all that. We got to shoot at each other and everything with the tracer and all that kind of stuff. I've got the video of it and all of that.
Yeah.
And the neat thing was, me and my news guy was in one plane, I was in the other, and the contest was see which one of us would get sick first. and I he got sick first,
Mm-hmm.
and I was about to go the whole time with that, doing just fine. But that last barrel roll got me. The last one got me. I thought, this is great. I'm going to be able to land. I'm going to go through this whole maneuver. Hour. We did an hour, and I'm not going to get sick. I'm going to be fine. But that last barrel roll got me. and as a matter of fact, my pilot, I'm trying to remember his name. My pilot was the gentleman who actually ran the organization,
Mm-hmm.
who was killed about 2 years later, doing that.
Mm-hmm.
In the business. They went down over Lake Conroe, and I've forgotten his name now. But anyway, yeah, but I enjoyed that. I've still got the VHS tape of it and everything that I pull out every once in a while.
Well, I wish I could find something. I might have something left around here. When I was doing the T-34s in New York at RPI, because part of my game was, of course, the same thing as you were doing. Well, who can get you airsick?
Yeah.
I had one student. Let me give the rest of the story.
Yeah.
I was flying out of a little dirt field, and the operator also sold what do you call it? Dog food. And had these little. They were the same as airsick bags, but they were paying for the dog for dog food. And she gave me a sack of them for airsick bags.
Yeah.
And the big deal for all my students was who could come home with their airsick bags still whole. And I had one kid who was just doing great.
Yeah.
And I thought this guy was going to really make it. But toward the end of the flight, he just clammed up, stopped talking.
Mm-hmm.
But he looked to be doing just great. So right after I landed and opened the canopy, he's hanging out the side of the airplane. He'd held the stuff in his mouth.
Oh, no. That was the reason he quit talking.
But he had his bag.
Yeah. He got the side of your plane dirty, though.
Yeah, he got to clean the airplane.
Yeah. Okay, where did we leave last? What were we?
We were in Maine.
Oh, you were in...
Oh, no, we were about down in Florida. And
Yeah.
T-34s.
Right.
That was good.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I came up from my dreaded overseas shore duty.
Uh-huh.
And I wound up going to Sigonella, Sicily.
Uh-huh.
For our 18-month tour. It was a short tour.
Mm-hmm.
And SIG turned out to be an interesting tour. I dreaded going there, but it was about the only base that you could go to for that kind of tour that you could also fly. And that was part of my gung-ho-ness was I still wanted to fly.
Right.
And Sigonella is located more or less on the eastern side of the island of Sicily, just about dead center. No, to go to the coast, drive 20 miles inland, and you'll find the airfield.
Yeah.
And it's a NATO airfield built in the early 60s. And it's built in a design that somebody came up with was based on survivability in a nuclear war. Actually, whoever came with the idea was kind of nuts, but they put the airfield in one space, and the living quarters were on another base, located about 20 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, when you look at it, if you pay much attention to nuclear weapons, if the bad guys put one bullet on top of the airfield, they got you too, in your house. It's just, anyway, kind of silly. But it turned out that SIG was a great place to go if you were a base person. If you're a deployed guy in a squadron, it's not, because you're living at the airfield by the runway and you're always flying.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it was when I was there as a pilot flying patrols, and that's the way it has been apparently ever since.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of the beast there. But if you're based as a station keeper, you can have a car, you can be all set up, and it works very well. There's a lot of history to be seen there.
Mm-hmm.
There's more Greek ruins on Sicily than there are in Greece.
Wow.
And some of it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of history on that island that you don't believe. Like on the town located in the center of the island called Enna, there is a greater than life-size bronze statue to Abraham Lincoln.
No kidding.
Which, when you first see it, and everybody that I talked to had the same reaction. What in the heck is that doing here?
Yeah.
And it goes back to the Garibaldi days of the Italian Republic, and the people who were supporters of Garibaldi looked upon Lincoln as this great hero.
Yeah.
And as such, that's why the monument's there.
I'll be darned.
And
still there, I assume. Yeah.
Now today, Enna, or at least when I was there, Enna was a communista town.
Yeah.
But in Italy, or in all of Italy, you learn that you never worried about the communists.
Yeah.
Because unlike the Soviet Union, Italy has 3 communist parties, or at the time we did, and none of them held one iota of allegiance to the Soviets. They were Italians first and foremost. And it was very unusual, to say the least, because here we were, all these North Americans trained to know we're anti-communist. And here they're our buddies. And the same thing worked with a lot of the mafia even.
Yeah. Yeah.
The mafia down there was quite different.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't do anything. It was bad for business.
Yeah.
I mean, they still did some pretty spectacular stunts.
Right.
But it was all done in almost a gentlemanly way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we used to go across the street and eat dinner at this little restaurante that was run by the local Don, and his wife was the chief cook, and his bodyguard sat by the front door. And that place was just as safe as you could go anywhere on the island. Good food. The Wall Street Journal was there every day.
So you're there 18 months?
Yep.
That was your overseas then?
Yep. It's,
what year are we now?
In 82.
That's when you left?
Yep.
82?
Yep. Came back in 83 and then went down to Corpus Christi. And Corpus Christi, I got a job that basically I don't think anybody else wanted, and turned out to be very good for me. It was the job was called synthetic training officer, which translates to being the guy in charge of all the flight simulators. And the Navy was in the process of putting in a batch of new simulators for the T-34 Charlie, and we had another bank of simulators there that were for the T-44. It's a twin engine trainer. I see them out at Easterwood quite often. And there was a lot of legal hassles going on there. So I wound up being in the middle of a acceptance of a batch of new equipment, which was always a good experience. And then I was in the legal aspects of these other ones, which turned out to be a great experience, because all of it put together is what got me into my post-Navy career. Was because I went to Corpus Christi.
I'll be darned.
And it was very strange. But in the meantime, I still got a lot of flight time. In Corpus, I got to fly a new airplane again.
Yeah.
We had brand new Beechcraft Super Kings.
Right.
And the Beechcraft Super King is a wonderful airplane.
Yeah.
Particularly the way the Navy buys them. The Navy bought them in a almost a fail-safe design, so that you cannot get into an emergency by accident.
Are these King Air?
Yeah, King Airs.
Similar to what A&M had or has? I don't know when they.
I don't know. Yeah.
When I worked for A&M athletic department, Jackie Sherrill and I used to fly around in King Air. That was
If you're flying
Bob McVeigh used to
the King
fly
Air,
us around.
there are 2 versions.
Yeah.
There's the King Air with the standard
Right.
vertical tail.
Right.
Then there's the Super King with the
Yeah.
T-tail.
Right. Okay.
The Super King exists today in many varieties because the military, among other people, has discovered how great an airplane it is.
Yeah.
I mean, the Navy knew it way back when. We were requested to take our C-12s onto jobs that nobody wanted to take a civilian bird onto, but now they're using one called the 350, which has much bigger engines than we did.
Yeah.
And they're flying them in Iraq and Afghanistan
Right.
as electronic warfare aircraft.
Right.
I mean, it's a great airplane
Yeah.
and most enjoyable to fly.
So this was your final tour?
Yes. Yep.
So this You were there till what, 85?
Yep.
And you retired?
Mhm.
And then how'd you get here to College Station?
By both coasts of the United States, 3 coasts.
So where'd you go?
I went to work for Link Flight Simulation.
Mhm.
That's the immediate connection to simulators.
Yeah, sure.
Up in Binghamton, New York.
Uh-huh.
I was the manager, director for a while of the test organization. So we were the ones who received the hardware and the software from the design engineers,
Uh-huh.
put it all together, and made it work.
Yeah.
And then after we made it work, we were responsible to sell the devices off to the ultimate customer, installation and sale. And that turned out to be a horrendously great job
Yeah.
because you had hands-on on all the devices. Being that I was a pilot, I was flying every one of them.
Uh-huh.
And then I was managing these people who went all over the world to install them. I mean, we had people in Saudi Arabia, we had them in Korea, had them in Australia, Germany,
Yeah.
Italy,
Yeah.
Greece.
Uh-huh.
Just trying to think of every place
Right.
we had, and all over the United States.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun.
Right.
Of course, did a lot of contracts work, which was very, very good. That helps me in my job here now,
Mhm.
for that matter.
Mhm.
And the dealing with the GAO auditors was interesting.
Yeah.
But I never flunked a GAO audit. In fact, I got to the point where a GAO person found out who they were dealing with at Harian, and they checked us off and kept on going. So that's what you call building a good reputation.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun in that job. Then a unique position popped up in California desert in '93, and I got selected to go out and work on the B-2 project as the liaison engineer, they called it, at the B-2 test squadron.
Mm-hmm.
And the B-2 was still black, but it had come out of the super black, and now they admitted, that it existed.
Mm-hmm.
And I went out to the desert, and I wound up being the only civilian in this Air Force test squadron,
Mm-hmm.
which was very good,
Mm-hmm.
because our contract with Link to build the simulator for the B-2 was unique in that we were the only other prime contractor in the whole B-2. Otherwise, Northrop was the prime contractor, and everybody else who worked on the project, including Boeing,
Mm-hmm.
was subcontractor to Northrop, except us.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that relationship, I was in kind of a unique position where I could, I could go as high as I wanted to make a complaint or to find out something.
Mm-hmm.
And the Air Force guys also learned that if they weren't getting something done by Northrop the way they wanted, they could come down and say, "Hey, Larry, could you complain about so-and-so about this?" And then I had the direct line again
Mm-hmm.
to where we could, and it actually worked out very good.
Mm-hmm.
My first 6 weeks on the job saved something like $1.5 million in our contract.
Wow.
Because what it did, I was cutting out the middlemen in information, and I could get info the day after there was a new discovery on the airplane,
Mm-hmm.
and get that back to Binghamton.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, we could run tests at Binghamton that they could not run in the real airplane. One of our guys actually designed a lot of the aerodynamics of the airplane, because it's all software.
Mm-hmm.
And the B-2 is a flying simulator.
Yeah. Exactly.
What it really boils down to.
Yeah.
It's all software.
Yeah.
But that was a wonderful job.
Mm.
I did 6 years out there,
6 years.
and get into
So you're 99 now?
Yep.
Then where?
back to New York.
Yeah. Back to Binghamton?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
And the ballyhoo was that, go ahead, buy yourself a new house, we're going to be here forever.
Yeah.
14 months later, I get transferred to St. Petersburg, Florida,
Uh-huh.
and they were standing down part of our operation up in New York.
I see.
And that was sad because I had a wonderful house.
Yeah.
I'd love to have the house still.
Uh-huh.
Then I went down to St. Petersburg and worked in another division. The company was Raytheon by now,
Right.
and I went into the
What did it start out? Who was your employer?
Link Flight Simulation.
Link Flight Simulation. Now it's become Raytheon. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And today it's Link again.
Okay.
It is now owned by L3 Corporation.
I see. Okay.
And this buying and selling of stuff,
Yeah.
which all really came about as
just so long as the check's cash, right?
Yeah, but that's the Clinton history of all of our military-industrial complex.
Right.
But anyhow,
Yeah.
Going down to St. Pete was interesting because I got onto an outfit called Cooperative Engagement Capability, and CEC, and it is a fantastic electronic system that ties all of the ships. Originally, it was just for ships. It ties all the ships in a battle group together for air defense, and then they added the airplanes into it, and then they started adding shore-based equipment. So today there are CEC units all over the world, and it's very neat. I first got exposed to it in 1985. I interviewed for a job with RCA, who at the time was building the Aegis cruisers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of funny because I got into getting the plant tour and all that with a bunch of other ex-Navy guys. I walk into the one room and they show me all the plans, how the system's going to work. And I just looked at, oh, this is cool. That means this ship over here can be the master, and he can decide if he doesn't have enough bullets to have this guy over here take a shot or this guy over here take a shot.
Uh-huh.
And the guy just looked at it. You've said enough. You've just blown the security of this room. I was hired to go to work there.
Yeah, I bet.
But then I did not get the job because literally in the time required for the hiring to go through, GE bought that division of RCA.
Yeah.
And GE said they didn't want any more Navy pilots in that program.
I see.
So the guy gave me this phone call, who was the hiring officer, and he said, "I'm sorry to tell you, but GE just said you weren't coming to work here." I said, "GE? This RCA." He says, "No, we're GE now." But anyway, the cute part about it is the amount of time it took to make it work, because that was '85,
right?
And it was just coming online supposedly. Yeah. They didn't get the software and the system to even begin to work until like '92. That was just to get the software ideas, because it was that much more complicated than everybody thought.
Yeah. And
the first really operational units didn't crop up until '98.
Yeah.
It was that complicated.
Yeah.
Because it all depends upon absolutely precise navigation.
Yeah.
And line of sight communication between your antennas.
Right.
If the antennas are not aligned perfectly between the ships and the airplanes involved, you can't talk, because that's part of the security. Because anytime you're dealing with information like that, you have to have high security on it.
Right.
So you have to have just these little bitty doggone beams,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And that one is so cool because today all the new U.S. Navy vessels have it. The Japanese have bought it, the Australians have bought it, the British have bought it, the Spanish have bought it, and I think the Italians have bought it.
I'll be darned.
And of course the Marine Corps is in it. The Air Force is putting it in some of their airplanes because it expands your horizon so far. And
sounds like a job you really wish you'd have gotten.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I like got it the first time.
Yeah, the first time, right.
I mean, when I got into it later on, it was kind of, we were in production.
Yeah, that's
production
true.
mode. We were not in design mode.
Right.
And the humorous part about it was one of my good friends over there was hired after I got transferred down to St. Pete because he understood navigation.
Mm-hmm.
And I started talking to him. Christ, if they'd hired me in 1985, I would have solved that.
Yeah.
I was not the computer man that he was, so I
Yeah.
couldn't write the software.
Right.
But all of the basic knowledge
Yeah.
of the navigation and the earth sciences, I'd already had that.
Yeah.
Because Earth is not round anyway; it's a doggone pear, and that gets into the math.
Right. Right.
And having all those standard numbers that are involved in celestial navigation, people just don't understand them.
Right.
Because today, it's not in anything you learn because you've got it all in this handheld calculator.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been there for years.
Exactly.
Anyway,
So from St. Pete.
St. Pete,
Yeah.
I retired out of there
Okay.
and came over here
Right.
just because I wanted to come home to Texas.
Uh huh.
And
Did you come to College Station?
yep, came to College Station by default because I was looking at the cities I thought I wanted to go to,
Mm-hmm.
and San Antonio, Austin, Houston, and DFW all have the same fault. I hate traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my cousins
Yeah.
had just moved over here the year before.
Right.
She's living up by the campus.
Yeah.
She said, "Larry, you got to come take a look at College Station. You're not going to believe it."
Yeah.
Of course, I hadn't been here since '61.
Right.
And I came over and took one look, and you're right.
What year was that?
That was in '03.
In 03.
And then started house hunting and just kind of walked into this one.
Yeah.
Folks who are in here wanted to go out to Indian Lakes.
Yeah. I see.
And heck, I've sold my house in Florida very well. So I could have bought this
Yeah.
entire house for cash. But
Yeah. And you've been retired here?
yes, yep,
And you got into local politics?
purely by accident.
I remember election night, you were as surprised as anybody that you'd won.
Yep.
Yeah. We won't talk about that on the show, but I remember that.
Oh, well,
but you're a good councilman, Larry.
Oh, thanks.
Do you enjoy it?
That kind of goes back and forth.
There's a lot of. The other night when I was there, I've only been to 2 council meetings. That was one of them, and I left there having a whole new admiration for you all, because that's a lot of time commitment.
It's a lot of
that
time.
you don't make.
It's a lot of hate. And
You all don't make any money,
There's no
right?
money.
Brian makes $5. You make
Right.
nothing,
Nothing.
right, or something.
Nothing.
And a lot of time commitment, a lot of politics, but it's a lot of minutia,
It's different.
a lot of speeches.
I got into it because I I was HOA president out here,
Uh-huh.
and then some other neighbors, as a result from over there, kind of gave me the offer you can't refuse to run for office, and then I did. And being in it today, if you listen to anything of me on Channel 19, maybe you'll hear me get kind of uptight periodically, because all my background is military and business.
Right.
And when you make your mind up in either one of those,
Uh-huh.
you go for it, because otherwise you will design, redesign, and analyze something to death and not get anything done.
Uh-huh. And there's people there alongside of you that would rather do it that way.
Oh,
the
yeah.
other.
Oh, yeah. So you've got to
Yeah.
to go ahead and do things. And even I think about the VP who drove me to retire over there in St. Pete. Both of us wound up leaving the plant at the same time.
Yeah.
For different reasons.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny, because he was the kind of man who had been there, done that, knew it all, and didn't have the interest or whatever to back off and see if someone else has a good idea or not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he also, you hear me and following the rules, he wasn't going to follow the rules.
Right.
And in dealing with the federal government right now, the way the regs are written, thou shalt do so, or thou shalt never ever be allowed to bid again. And between you and me, if somebody writes a rule like that, and that's the difference between me putting bread on the table and not, I'm going to follow their rules.
Yeah. So tell me about your family. I know you lost your wife, right?
Yep. That was in '01.
In '01.
Yeah.
When were you all married?
66.
In '66.
Yep.
So right after you got out of.
Well,
Soon after you got out of school.
Yep. Yep.
When had you known her, like, was she a childhood?
We met when I was a freshman at Annapolis.
Over there.
Up there.
Right.
And got married.
Uh-huh.
Worked out.
Yeah.
Trouble was, she contracted an illness called Crohn's disease.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
Crohn's killed her, although it took a number of years to finally finish her.
Right.
And the bad thing about Crohn's disease is that Crohn's almost, not 100%, but almost invariably results in a secondary illness,
Mm-hmm.
which will be a psychiatric one.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the psychiatric disease is worse than the Crohn's, and Crohn's is bad enough.
Right. Right.
And because in Jan's case, she was bipolar,
Yeah.
manic depressive, and that wiped out her ability to be responsible.
Yeah. That's a tough time.
And
Yeah.
that was different.
Yeah. So you all have kids and
Just one.
just one? Got any grandkids?
No.
No. And what is a son or daughter?
Daughter.
And where is she?
Seattle.
In Seattle?
Safest place in the country for her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
other than that, the rest of my family's right here in Texas.
Right. Yeah.
And
What a fascinating story, guys. It's just amazing. It's what we'll do on Thursday is we'll hit the high points as quickly as we can, because
Yep.
it's amazing how long a 30-minute show goes. But just knowing it all is just tremendous. Do you have any photographs? I don't want many. I mean, like, do you have an official Navy photograph or anything like that that's you can put your hands on?
There you go. See.